Y yo también los amo, pero cuestan más que mi renta. Pero Penny, te hacemos ver también.
This glamorous TikToker was known for her beauty, her fabulous closet, and lifestyle content. Then her body was found in a pickup truck. And tragically, her body wasn't the only one found. Was this a random murder or was this a targeted attack? We're breaking down what we know so far with retired FBI and CIA agent Tracy Walder.
I believe that this was probably a targeted cartel hit. This seems very targeted, in my opinion. It seems that the individuals really laid in wait for them, knew what their movements were, had been looking at them for quite some time, and then obviously you have the addition of them being discarded in the way that they did. Typically, that is something that we see with cartels and the executions that they do.
Thanks for joining us on Law and Crime. I'm Elizabeth Millner. Esmeralda Ferrer Garibay's body was found wrapped in plastic in that abandoned pickup truck. It's been reported that 2 men were questioned about her murder. Then, in a wild twist, those men were kidnapped by armed men within minutes of leaving the prosecutor's office. Esmeralda Ferrer Garibay has amassed tens of thousands of followers on TikTok alone. Her page is filled with glamorous photos of her, lavish trips, fancy cars, designer shoes, and bags. It seemed like she was living the dream. Then 4 bodies were found in an abandoned gray Ford Ranger in Guadalajara, Mexico. One of those bodies was Esmeralda. The others, shockingly, were of her family, including her 36-year-old husband, Roberto, and their 2 children, a 13-year-old and a 7-year-old. According to reports, their bodies were discovered on August 22nd. However, their identities weren't confirmed until 6 days later. What's more shocking is all 4 bodies were wrapped in plastic before being dumped into the pickup. Investigators believe that the family was killed execution style. Initial findings point toward a possible cartel hit. According to the Latin Times, Esmeralda seemed to embrace narco corridos, especially in her TikTok videos.
5757. Adelante, 57 se escuchó bien caliente.
Narcos corridos are Mexican ballads that seemingly glorify drug trafficking culture. One of her viral videos featured the caption, "Advantages of having a narco boyfriend." But maybe that caption was all for show on social media, because according to the same report, preliminary findings show Roberto, her husband, wasn't even a gang member or in the cartel. However, investigators do believe Roberto's job might likely have been the motive behind the murders. Here's what we know about Esmeralda's husband. He was reportedly involved in tomato farming and vehicle trading. And while those jobs don't seem dangerous, according to authorities in Mexico, it might have attracted violence from organized crime groups. And investigators were quick to clear up that Esmeralda's content were the prime motive behind the attack. Investigators had to work backwards, though, starting from the truck she and her family were found in. According to the Latin Times, authorities used CCTV video and data from the Ministry of Security and National Guard, and that's where they traced the truck's path to a mechanic's workshop. When police raided it, they reportedly found bloodstains, spent bullet casings, and other ballistic evidence. With those clues, they believe the family was executed at the workshop and their bodies were transported in the pickup. The prosecutor said in a statement, while the forensic results are not in yet, ballistic and blood evidence almost certainly confirm that they were murdered at that location. 2 workers were later detained, Hector Manuel Martinez and another man with the nickname El Chino. Hector and El Chino were released because of lack of evidence, but in a shocking twist, both men along with their 2 relatives were kidnapped by an armed group. Officials say El Chino escaped, but as of this recording, the other 3 are still missing. According to the Latin Times, prosecutor Blanco Trujillo said the kidnappers were watching the office exit for more than 2 hours. So you have a coordinated attack to kill a family of 4 and a coordinated plan to kidnap the people who were questioned about it. Are the people behind it all the same, or was the kidnapping of the suspects revenge? That's all unclear at this time. There is still so much mystery into this case. I'm joined now by former FBI and CIA agent Tracy Walder. Tracy, thank you so much for joining me. So we have this glamorous TikToker and her entire family are found dead, wrapped in plastic in the back of an abandoned pickup truck. What's your reaction to this case?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Elizabeth. In my opinion, it's incredibly sad, especially when you have a 7-year-old and a 13-year-old that were essentially executed and left like trash. Obviously, I'm not diminishing the life of the parents, but I think sometimes cases like this are even more difficult when there are 2, seemingly innocent children involved.
And from what we know right now, do you think, again, from the limited information that's been released so far, do you think this was a cartel hit, organized crime? What do you think it was?
Again, I'm simply hypothesizing
Hmm.
based off of what I know and the things that I've worked. I believe that this was probably a targeted cartel hit. This seems very targeted. In my opinion, it seems that the individuals really laid in wait for them, knew what their movements were, had been looking at them for quite some time. And then obviously you have the addition of them being discarded in the way that they did. Typically, that is something that we see with cartels and the executions that they do.
And who do you think the killers might have been after? Do you think it was Esmeralda herself? Do you think it was her husband? I mean, authorities say that her husband was a tomato farmer and did vehicle trading, and that might have made him a target for organized crime. But what are your thoughts?
In my opinion, I think it's a combination of both. Anytime you are flaunting significant wealth, and I've gone through her social media, and that's what she was doing. I'm not at all saying that she deserved any of this. She absolutely did not. People are entitled to have their platforms and do what they want with those, but you do have to be careful. When you are flaunting that degree of wealth, whether she had it or not, I don't know, but she was, flaunting that. That does make you a target. I have a friend who does that also on TikTok, and she has been a target of the home invasion. It makes you a target. Also, though, she has made comments that her husband, worked for a cartel. I do not know at all if those were offhanded comments, or if they were actually true. I think, a lot of times, particularly in Mexico in general, you have individuals who can't meet their basic needs based on the salaries that they have in their jobs. And that is a lot of times why they do turn to work for the cartels. So I think it could have been a combination of both.
And as it seems like we're seeing a lot of content creators either kind of caught up in either being the victims of these types of crimes or, in other cases, not in this case by any chance, or perpetrators of crimes and things like that in foreign countries. Do you think it's something that content creators need to be more waryful or more mindful, I should say, when, in terms of when they're posting stuff? Because, while me as a viewer might love to see like luxury handbags and cars and shoes and all that stuff, I think also on the flip side, people who are interested in getting that might also be looking at the same content I'm looking at and wanting to do, more nefarious things like that, such as targeting an innocent family, as we're kind of seeing play out in this case. But do you think it's something that content creators need to be more mindful of as a whole?
100%. I think you're absolutely right. And like I said, I have actually a very close friend who is a pretty high profile TikTok influencer. We're talking millions and millions of followers, someone who I have been close friends with for almost a decade. Our kids are friends. They go over for play dates, those kinds of things. I just saw her a few weeks ago. And I was, talking to her about her new she's got some security things in place. I don't want to say what they are in particular. It'll give her away. And it was all because of a home invasion robbery that she had had at her home. And yes, she does do unboxing of extremely expensive, extremely high-end luxury items. That's who she is, and I'm certainly not going to tell her not to do that. But I'm not sure in her wildest dreams, and her home is pretty well secured even before this, that she had expected something like this to happen. And so I think influencers really need to be careful about what they're putting out there. And if they choose to put out that high-end content, which again is perfectly fine, they really need to be sure that they have proper security measures in place.
And I can't stress enough how preliminary the information is that we know right now. But I'm curious, why do you think that the killers murdered the children too? I thought maybe there would be some way, if this was an organized crime hit or a cartel hit, that, maybe the children would be spared. But why do you think they were murdered too? I mean, they are just 7 and 13 years old, just innocent beings, as well as the other victims too. But I'm just so curious, why do you think that the children were killed?
I think that's most people's questions. I think in this case, I think something pretty significant occurred in some kind of a breakdown with the cartel, and either a significant amount of money was owed or there had been retaliatory violence. And I think because you're right, they could have, again, not diminishing this crime at all, they could have really targeted the adults in this situation because, again, I do believe that they had been sitting on them for quite some time, but they made an effort to commit this crime when the children were present. And so I think this is part of sort of this overarching message, because that's a lot of times what the cartel does. They will eliminate entire families as a result of trying to get back or settle some score.
And it could just have been one person who was the target of the crime, and then their entire family becomes the victim of the crime too. And when authorities traced the truck that the family was found dead in back to a mechanic's workshop, they found blood, they found spent shell casings, which might have suggested that the family was killed there. Do you kind of agree with what authorities believe right now, that the family might have been killed at that auto shop?
That's what I believe. It seems to me that that's the point of origin of the crime. Obviously, based on particularly spent shell casings, would definitely tell me that's where the shooting itself probably happened. And honestly, it actually speaks to the brazenness, to be completely honest, because typically when we see crimes like that, people do tend to pick up their shell casings. They don't want them to be able to be traced. They don't want any forensic evidence to be there. But it seems to me these individuals don't necessarily care and don't think that they're going to be caught.
And what are your thoughts even about the men who were detained for questioning? Then they were abducted. I mean, one managed to escape, but there are still three men who are missing as we're speaking about this right now, as we're recording this right now. But is that surprising that it happened, or do you think it was possibly revenge, or possibly to send a message like "don't talk, don't snitch," something like that? What are your thoughts on the men who were detained and then later abducted?
I think it's absolutely to send a message. And the one that got away is in pretty significant danger, in my opinion. I believe they are probably looking for him as we speak, not the police, but the cartels, in my opinion, in this case. My guess is this person will lay low, will not speak at all about this crime. And that's why it will be ultimately incredibly hard to prosecute and bring someone to justice.
And in investigating cases that happen in Mexico, I know a lot of people have kind of their opinions on what goes on in that country, but do you see stuff like this often happening in Guadalajara?
I think in general it's tough because our country isn't perfect either, right? And so a lot of times it's coming from this place of people talking down about Mexico and about their law enforcement. I think that's actually completely unfair, in my opinion. But the problem is again, a lot of the criminal justice apparatus has been infiltrated by these drug cartels. And I don't want to say the behavior becomes acceptable, because it doesn't. And there are plenty of people that do not think that this behavior is acceptable. It's also not something that is happening, 100 times a day, every day. But unfortunately, this kind of violence is very much a part of their lives.
And in terms of investigating and working a case like this with maybe so little to go off of, and maybe people are afraid to speak, how hard is it to investigate a case for law enforcement who are just trying to do their jobs, bring a family and have them get justice? But what's it like when people might be too scared to talk?
The police are scared, quite frankly. I mean, you saw them eliminated an entire family, right? They eliminated the whole family, and then not to mention on top of that, anyone that was brought in for questioning, obviously aside from the individual that escaped, was also kidnapped, and I would presume dead as well. And so I think the police feel this threat probably every single day, and it makes it really difficult. They don't want their families to become targets of this either, and I understand that.
Yeah, and it's really hard. It's a really tough situation. I'm hoping that the family can get justice in some type of way. Tracy Walder, I want to thank you so much for your insight into this case. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me, Elizabeth.
As of this recording, no official arrests have been made, and the three men who were kidnapped are reportedly still missing. Thanks so much for joining us here on Law and Crime. I'm Elizabeth Millner.